You're listening to Smart Money on Talking Lifestyle.
Yeah, Nick Bennett with you. And look, as a nation, Australia is mad about real estate, especially in Sydney. Real estate and property investment is discussed with the same level of enthusiasm as details like the weekend's footy match. Only instead of scores and player stats, it's closing prices, auction clearance rates and growth outlooks. You hear us talking about it here on the radio. But when you start to look into buying real estate, you quickly discover it isn't a level playing field. It's you against the estate agents and you against market forces that you may not completely understand, which is why you should seek help from an expert. Lloyd Edge is a very successful property investor, and he's also the director and founder of Aus Property Professionals, one of our sponsors here at Talking Lifestyle. He's got a fascinating personal story about his entry into the property investment game, and it's a pleasure to have you on. G'day, mate.
G'day, Nick. How are you going? Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Lloyd. And yes, thanks for picking me up. Your property portfolio previously was around $3 million, but it's now, you're happy to share, it's now peaked up to around...
It's $10 million now.
Wow.
Yeah, across about 15 properties.
Okay. Well, congratulations.
So it's bubbling along quite well.
It is indeed. So back to the beginning, what started the journey? Because you haven't always been a property investor.
No, I actually started out as a musician. And I spent many years as a music teacher and as a conductor. Had many wonderful years enjoying teaching kids music and everything like that. Yeah. During that time, though, I always knew that I wanted to do something more in terms of setting myself up with financial and lifestyle goals.
Yeah.
And that working just with the regular teacher salary wasn't going to do that. So during my whole time of teaching, I was also investing in property and starting to set myself on the path for the future with the aim that I wanted to be able to retire from teaching eventually and really concentrate on building wealth for the future.
Look, clearly you got to be good at numbers when you're mucking around with $10 million property portfolios. What's the correlation between music and numbers?
Well, pretty much music and economics and maths go hand in hand, really. So, but I got to say, when I was in high school, economics was actually my best subject.
Oh, like Mick Jagger, or Sir Mick Jagger.
Yeah, well, that's right. Actually, I did better in economics than music, but chose the path of music at the time.
Interesting.
So, so maybe this is life taking a bit of a full turn here.
That's very good. Now, look, it is a personal story. Your wife is somehow involved in this journey as well. Stepping back to music, she now has moved out of that area as you have and is working with you.
Yeah, well, she's an accountant, so she did economics, so she's pretty good with numbers and stuff as well.
Yeah.
And she's also, a musician. We sort of met in that path and everything like that. But yeah, it's definitely a personal story where I wanted to set us up for the future.
Yeah.
Just as I said, just working for the salary and thinking about having a superannuation or the pension in the future. Wasn't really going to cut it, and I wanted to be able to create some equity that was going to allow us to live the lifestyle that we wanted to live in the future. Particularly knowing that even the age of retirement was going to perhaps be pushed back as well. When Joe Hockey was talking about making it, you've got to work until you're 70 and everything like that, and didn't want to rely on those sort of things. So I wanted to make sure that that I could set myself up and my wife Renee, so that we could set ourselves up, for the future like that.
Do you feel a sense of freedom and independence in having achieved this?
Well, I do, and it's basically just given us a sense of freedom in our life, so that we can basically do what we want, live the sort of lifestyle that we want to be able to live.
Yeah.
So instead of having to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and spend a whole day at work and be tied down to jobs like that, and then we have to ask people for ask your boss for a day off work because you want to do something,
or for a pay rise,
rise,
those awkward conversations,
all those sort of things. This is sort of given a lot more freedom in life.
All right, so I'm sure that this success has come through hard work, but what's a typical day for you now? Like when you're running a portfolio with your wife that's worth $10 million, what's a normal day?
Well, a normal day, I mean, I have a routine. So a normal day for me is getting up about 7 o'clock in the morning, going for a walk, having a coffee, reading the paper.
Yeah.
So it's always very important to have a good routine, I think, to start every day.
Yeah.
And reading the property news in the paper and seeing what else is there. And of course, throughout the day, I help a lot of investors and people with their own investing and stuff. So that incorporates quite a lot of my days. And of course, still looking after my own portfolio and stuff, throughout the day. So I do a lot of property stuff just during the day. But I can also do that from wherever I am, so I don't have to be tied down to just working in my office. I can take trips to interstate or overseas and be doing that job while I'm gone.
All right, so you've got your own portfolio to take care of, and then clients as well that you advise.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so as a buyer's agent in my company, I basically work with clients who are wanting to get ahead in property. For the same sort of things that I've done. So and I basically help set them strategies to be able to achieve financial and lifestyle goals for the future. Now, financial independence for people it means different things for different people. So they could be wanting to retire from their job. They could be wanting to work part-time. They might have a young family and they're wanting to work on how to save enough money to put their kids through school. They might want to be able to go on family holidays without worrying about where the money's going to come from. So everyone's got a different story that they want to try to achieve.
Last one I can relate to that last one.
But the thing is that most people have the same sort of story, which is where they're sort of stuck in a job, not really seeing a real way out of it, worried about where the money's going to come from in the future. Things are getting more expensive. Can we afford a house in Sydney? Should we be buying a property somewhere else? Should I even be living in Sydney? Should I be looking for somewhere else? So there's a lot of things. So we talk about strategies with them and how we can get to achieving those goals with them.
Okay, so as a buyer's agent, you're in the business of looking for good quality property, investment property in particular. What are the criteria you consider when looking for a decent property you'd recommend to somebody?
Okay, so there's two things I consider. Firstly, there's the macro, what I call the macro type things. So that is actually the area as a whole that has to have all the economics, all the pillars of economic growth. So it's got to be where there's a rising population, where there's jobs growth. I like to buy where there's close to where there's either new hospitals or there's hospital upgrades. Because that basically means that you're going to get some good tenants into your property.
Does it? Well, potentially who may work at the hospital?
Yeah, that's right. So people like doctors and nurses who move to an area because they're always posted to various areas to work. So that they might need to rent in a place for a while. And also where there's universities, they're also a good driver for economic growth. We need to be where there's a good cosmopolitan lifestyle. So shops, cafes, good transport. How
important? You've mentioned transport. How important is a rail system? Because I know that in Sydney you can pay possibly a premium of as much as 30% to be near a rail line.
Well, it's really important. And if you look at some of the western suburbs that have done very, very well in recent years, Summerhill, Lewisham and Petersham, they're all on the train line. It's very easy access to get to the city or to get further out, and people like the convenience. It depends on the different areas, the different cities. So Brisbane, they've got slightly different. They're a little bit more reliant on buses up there. Down in Melbourne, although Sydney's getting a lot more light rail now, Melbourne's always had the trams.
Wonderful system.
Trams are still a big thing down there. So the transport system's a little bit different. Obviously, if you look at some of the major regional centres like Newcastle or Wollongong, would be looking at being close to bus stops more than being close to train lines because there's not such a big train system. But
the fact that Newcastle, Wollongong are on the electric train line is in itself an advantage, isn't it?
Well, it is in terms of good access to the city.
And
so those are all the macro drivers, I think, of getting a good investment property.
All right.
But then you need to look at the actual property you get.
So these are these are the micro drivers. The
micro drivers, Okay,
the nitty-gritty of the particular property you're looking at.
So it's really important to be buying in the right street.
Right.
And even the right side of the street.
Okay.
And it's important to be buying in a quiet street, maybe a cul-de-sac. Buying in areas where there's low vacancy rates. And because you don't want to be buying where there's a 6% vacancy rate and there's a chance that your property will sit empty because there's no point buying a really good yielding property and having no one rent it because then there'll be the rental yield
it's hopeless.
zero.
Exactly. Okay.
So that's very important. So all those little things.
Is there a general good side of a street? I mean, I like north, I like east, I know that stuff, but, have you identified a generalisation?
I don't think there's anything general,
okay,
but it just depends on what's happening because one side of the street could be in a flood zone, like might be near the river, you might want to be buying on the other side of the street. You might want to be buying at the top of the street because there's less likely to flood than at the bottom of the street, for example. There obviously in Sydney, like certain suburbs like Marrickville, for example, you're going to be under a flight path. If you go to Brisbane, you'll be areas like Hawthorn and Cannon Hill and Morningside, which will be under the flight path. But
very, very good for plane enthusiasts. So,
that's right.
Could work either way.
Yeah. So you sort of should be trying to avoid those kind of areas, and certainly trying to get to if you need to buy in one of those suburbs, try to get to part of that suburb that isn't that doesn't have not so impacted by those factors.
There's a belief that property hotspots exist in certain parts of the market. Is that fact or fiction?
It's probably more fiction. I'm not a big believer.
So? Okay.
Not a big believer in hotspots.
No.
Hotspots are those sort of places where there's predicted to be a lot of growth because there's going to be some infrastructure, some
new hospitals,
rise in population. Like a new hospital and new shops and a new road network all being built over the next few years. The problem with hotspots is that when people start talking about hotspots, everyone wants to go and invest there. So it doesn't become a hotspot; it becomes flooded with investors. And we've seen that in a few different markets. And I can use a couple of examples. In Queensland, it's happened in Ipswich, happened in Toowoomba. Now, Toowoomba is a great area to invest in for the long term. But people went and invested there thinking that they were going to make a lot of growth in a short period of time. But when everyone went there, too many investors, vacancy rates actually went up, the rental yields went down. So the way I look at things is that to have success, you need to try to do things differently to everybody else. So sort of don't follow the crowd and try to go where there's good long-term growth in place rather than just where you think it's going to suddenly grow in 6 months' time.
Yeah, I like your thinking, Lloyd. I've always, a mate of mine who's been in real estate for 25, 30 years, that I met years ago at an open house, an open flat it was back in the olden days. And, he said a similar thing, if people walk that way, then have a think about going left if they're all going right. So probably answers my next question. That is, finally, to wrap it up, you read newspapers in the morning. Once you're reading about hotspots, you've missed the boat.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's definitely too late. And those people who read property magazines, that's always the case, is that something that's printed there is usually been in about 3 or 4 months old. By the time they're reading about it, it's kind of too late. So you really need to be a little bit ahead of the game.
Lloyd Edge, Director and Property Acquisition Specialist with Australian Property Professionals. Great to talk to you. I know you're back next week.
Thanks, Nick. Great to be with you.